Next item we have on the agenda is a discussion item regarding environmental assessment worksheet for proposed Alatus development at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast. Staff report.
Council President Johnson, members of the committee, I'm Hillary Dvorak and I represent Community Planning and Economic Development. This is an environmental, a petition for an environmental assessment worksheet was submitted and forwarded to the city on April 5th.
Madam Chair.
Are we having trouble hearing?
I would suggest we wait till a quorum is present to consider the matter.
I'm sorry. Okay. We had a long public hearing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bussey.
Just double checking.
Ms. Dvorak, thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Council President Johnson, members of the committee, I'm Hillary Dvorak and I represent CPED. On April 5th, 2016, the city of Minneapolis received a petition forwarded from the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board that had been filed by Neighbors for East Bank Livability requesting the preparation of an environmental assessment worksheet for the project known as the Alatus Tower, located at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast. The EQB determined that the city of Minneapolis is the appropriate responsible governmental unit for the decision on the petition. The EQB published the notice in the EQB Monitor on April 11th, 2016, and the city was assigned as the RGU. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing structures on the property and construct a new 40-story mixed-use building. The building would include a total of 207 dwelling units, 6,700 square feet of ground floor retail space, and 333 parking spaces. The site is located in the St. Anthony Falls Historic District. A certificate of appropriateness is required to allow the proposed demolition of the structures on the property, and a separate certificate of appropriateness is required for the proposed new construction. Both of these applications will be required to be reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Commission. The project is also subject to review by the Planning Commission. Several land use applications will be required for the proposed development, including a conditional use permit to increase height and a variance to increase the maximum FAR. A travel demand management plan that analyzes traffic and parking operations in the immediate area will also be required for the project. The TDMP will be reviewed by the city's Department of Public Works and CPED. The petitioners state that the project is subject to a mandatory EEW under Minnesota Rules, Part 4410.4300, Subpart 19C. This rule states that in cities that are located in the 7-county Twin Cities metropolitan area that have adopted a comprehensive plan under Minnesota statutes, the threshold for a mandatory EEW is 150 attached units if the project is not consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan. The petitioners state that the project meets this threshold based on the size of the project and its inconsistency with the adopted comprehensive plan, specifically chapters 1, land use, 8, heritage preservation, and 10, urban design. The petitioners also state that the project is inconsistent with the St. Anthony Falls Historic Design Guidelines. However, these guidelines are not part of the city's comprehensive plan. The rules provide that the designated RGU shall order the preparation of an EEW if the evidence presented by the petitioners demonstrates that because of the nature or location of the proposed project, the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The RGU shall deny the petition if the evidence presented fails to demonstrate that the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. The petitioners cite 5 areas of concern that they believe will result in the potential for significant environmental effects should the project be constructed. These include damage to adjacent historic structures, visual impacts and shadowing of historic properties, traffic impacts, noise and dust, and cumulative impacts of development. The following factors must be considered today. First, the type, extent, and reversibility of environmental effects. The environmental effects identified in the petition are visual, localized, and can be mitigated through the city's formal development review process. This process captures and evaluates development proposals not only from a planning perspective, but also includes evaluations by the Public Works Department, the Construction Code Services Division of CPED related to building code review and inspections during and after the completion of the project, and the various utility companies. The identified effects are reversible until the final discretionary approvals for the proposed project are granted through the city's development review process. The project will require city approvals, including but not limited to the Heritage Preservation Commission and the City Planning Commission. Through both of these review processes, the Heritage Preservation Commission will evaluate the project for compliance with the St. Anthony Falls Historic District Design Guidelines and the Comprehensive Plan. In addition, the City Planning Commission will evaluate the project for compliance with the zoning ordinance and also the Comprehensive Plan. The second factor to consider is cumulative potential effects of related or anticipated future projects. All future development within the area will be considered through the city's development review process. This has and will continue to allow the city to manage potential cumulative effects of future development within the vicinity and throughout the city as a whole. The third factor to consider is the extent to which the environmental effects are subject to mitigation by ongoing public regulatory authority. The city's development review process is comprehensively administered by city staff and implemented by experienced commissioners and the city council. Any potential environmental effects are mitigated by the city's development review process. The last factor to consider is the extent to which environmental effects can be anticipated and controlled as a result of other applicable environmental studies undertaken by public agencies or the project proposer, including other environmental impact statements. A project of this type within an urban setting is neither unique nor unanticipated. Residential, commercial, and mixed-use developments that have been significantly more intense than the proposed project have been the subject of EAWs and EISs, as well as the city's development review process. Based on these studies, the environmental effects of this project can be anticipated and controlled by the city's development review process. It is undisputed today that the proposed number of dwelling units within the project exceeds 150 attached units. There are 207 attached units proposed. However, the project is in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan and therefore does not meet any of the mandatory EAW thresholds. The Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth identifies the site as mixed use on the future land use map. The site is also located in the East Hennepin Activity Center and is located along Central Avenue Northeast, which is a designated community corridor in this location. In the comprehensive plan, the mixed-use designation allows for mixed-use development, including mixed use with residential. Mixed use may include either a mix of retail, office, or residential uses within a building or within a district. The proposed use of the project is consistent with the future land use guidance of the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, activity centers are designated as places with a mix of uses that have citywide and regional draw. They contain a high intensity of uses. Densities in activity centers range between high density, which is 50 to 120 dwelling units per acre, and very high density, which is 120 to 200 dwelling units per acre, depending on the context. In addition, densities up to 800 dwelling units per acre may be allowed in or near all designated growth centers and within activity centers adjacent to growth centers as consistent with adopted small area plans. The proposed density of the project is 259 dwelling units per acre, which is consistent with the policy guidance in the comprehensive plan. The petitioner's arguments are based on general and aspirational components of the city's comprehensive plan. The alleged inconsistencies with the comprehensive plan relate to judgments about character and compatibility. The city of Minneapolis concludes the following. The findings of fact and record of decision document and related documentation were prepared in compliance with the procedures of the Minnesota Environmental Policy Acts and Minnesota rules. The project does not meet any of the mandatory EW thresholds contained in the Minnesota rules. The project is in compliance with the city's comprehensive plan. The project does not have the potential for significant environmental effects. The petitioners failed to meet their burden of proof that the project may have the potential for significant environmental effects. Although there are many arguments presented, they are largely anecdotal and unsupported by compelling evidence. The city of Minneapolis makes the finding that the petition for the EAW for the Alatus Tower project on the property located at 200 Central Avenue Southeast and 113 2nd Street Southeast is denied. The city of Minneapolis City Council shall adopt the proposed findings of fact and record of decision document. And I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bork. Any questions from committee members? We've been joined by Councilmember Fry. Seeing none, this action does not require a public hearing, but I'm going to allow 15 minutes for people to speak on either side of the issue. So I would start with the list that I have, so I'll keep track. People should keep to perhaps 2 minutes each. Again, I think that's a reasonable thing, and that'll accommodate the people that we have signed in. So I'm going to start. Mr. Griffith?
Madam Chair, Bill Griffith representing the petitioners. My remarks are a little bit longer than 2 minutes, and they're substantive, and so I think they should be presented in the record. The rest of the group will keep their remarks short, but they've hired me to represent them and present testimony.
Then, Mr. Griffith, then I'm going to suggest that all of your people together then would limit their remarks to about 8 minutes, and then so you take the time that you need within that 8 minutes, please.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Griffith.
Would you like me to start?
Yes, why don't you start?
Sounds like a perfect idea. Madam Chair, council members, we do appreciate the courtesy that is given here for this testimony. It is odd, I think, that a petition for an EAW wouldn't have a public hearing, so we appreciate your making the extra step, and Councilmember Fry making the request on our behalf. He's also extended courtesies to the neighborhood to meet with them on several occasions, so that's greatly appreciated. I'll be to the point. Obviously, we have a difference of opinion with your staff, and the reason to file a petition for an EAW is to make sure there's good scrutiny of what is really a massive project on the East Bank. It's without precedent. I think we are well aware of that. It's actually 42 stories in height. If you do some counting, we won't quibble over 2 stories. I think at more than 40 stories, it is significant. The biggest project ever proposed for the East Bank, certainly in terms of height, on a site that's less than 1 acre. It is 8 times greater than the allowed density by your city code. It is 38 stories taller than the 8-story guideline in your historic district, St. Anthony Falls Historic District, that was just adopted in 2012. And we've heard that's just a guideline. But your zoning, your comprehensive plan, and your historic guidelines all work together to create that regulatory framework that I think was mentioned by Councilmember Goodman just a few minutes ago in another hearing. And so those things work together. They aren't pulled apart and one is set aside and the guideline doesn't have precedence or meaning within the comprehensive plan. In fact, it gives life to the very policies for preservation within the comprehensive plan. But it's not just about height. It's about all of the cumulative effects of a project that is massive, not just here, but anywhere in the city. Your comprehensive plan document says to locate the tallest buildings in the city within the downtown core. This is clearly not the downtown core. It's an historic neighborhood. And this would be the 11th tallest building in your city. Think about that. The 11th tallest building in your city, located in the historic birthplace of Minneapolis, that is home to small buildings, 2-story townhomes, some other high-rises that were developed in the 80s before your historic regulations took effect. And so a very important neighborhood, a neighborhood that I love to visit. I'm there frequently, not as a resident, but as a visitor. Why? Because it has those unique attributes. And the concern of my clients is not that development will occur. They've enjoyed the development in their neighborhood that's created vitality in a really important neighborhood in the city, but it has to be within the scale of what's there today. So why do this by an EAW? An EAW covers all of the issues that your staff addressed, but it does it in a methodical, independent document, an analysis that everybody can weigh in on through a hearing process that really scrutinizes a project that deserves scrutiny. This is not a project like the last one that completely complies with your city code. In fact, it is way out of scale with the city code. The issue that we've raised is that we believe that an EAW is in fact mandatory by law. And why is it mandatory by law? You cannot define consistency with the comprehensive plan with regard to this project. How do we know that? Again, we go to your zoning code and your historic documents. Those are the tools by which you implement your vision for this neighborhood and others. And one of the concerns we have, it's really a nagging question because those same documents and regulatory framework seem to operate to limit development in the North Loop, a neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to downtown, to 10 stories. And yet in this case, those very same documents and controls would allow consideration of a 42-story tower. Again, there's no consistency in the application of those regulatory controls. So environmental effects include not just effects on air and water, but also, and importantly in this case, effects on historic resources. There are 3 contributing historic resources that are directly affected. And I know you have an HPC process to review that, but that is also the appropriate consideration for an EAW, okay? So it is not inappropriate that an EAW consider the fact that you have the Pillsbury Library building 16 feet from the base of this massive structure. The Art Godfrey House immediately across Central Avenue, and then the site itself, your staff has identified as a contributing historic structure. Those are important resources and a valid consideration and concern for an environmental assessment worksheet. I've mentioned that the document itself, I won't repeat all of the things that are in the record in writing, but there are many, many policies that are affected. And the city staff has essentially winnowed those by saying that those concerns that we've raised are general and aspirational, and the concern and the issues that have been identified are specific and applicable. Well, we would disagree. When you do that kind of winnowing, when you have to pick and choose which policies apply and which don't, that's arbitrary by definition. Wouldn't it be better, in fact, to give this project the scrutiny it deserves through an EAW process? What are we afraid of? There is no harm done to the project to ask difficult questions about its effect on the environment. We know that this East Bank area is built on a foundation, a substrata that causes vibration to occur in adjacent buildings. That's in the record. That is actually material evidence that we provided in the record. Those are the kind of scientific considerations that should be considered. This project has some of the highest parking density. Think about it. So if the site is less than an acre and it proposes 414 parking spaces, we're looking at a density of cars of 512 per acre. That is very high density of automobile usage in an area that's already congested with traffic. We know that congested traffic leads to air quality problems. We know that air quality problems affect human health. These are not trumped up concerns. They are concerns that are real and valid and should be addressed. Again, what is the concern about a scrutiny of a project of this size? There shouldn't be. Finally, and I think to the main point, you cannot find this project consistent with your comprehensive plan. Why? Because your comprehensive plan is implemented by your zoning ordinance. Your comprehensive plan is implemented by the historic district guidelines that you all or your predecessors approved in 2012. That document suggests an 8-story height limitation. Why? Because that's what predominates in the area with some exception. So you cannot say that it's consistent with your comprehensive plan if the very documents that implement your comprehensive plan call for a project of a very reduced scale. We have recent experience with the NISE project finally being reduced to a scale that's consistent with the neighborhood, and we ask that you really ultimately decide the same thing here. But finally, we ask, what is the harm in ordering an EAW when it looks to us like it's mandated by law? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. I'm going to ask if there is anyone from the proposers, developers, that would like to speak, and then we'll see how much time we have left. It looks to me like about 11:30 we're going to wrap up. Ms. Lansing.
Good morning, President Johnson and committee members. I'm Carol Lansing, attorney at Figure Baker Daniels, representing the proposer of the project, Alatus. Bob Lux and Chris Osmondson of Alatus are also here today. Our response to the petition is included in the record, but I would like to summarize the points made in our response and in support of the staff recommendation to deny the petition. First, the project does not exceed any mandatory threshold for an EAW, including the threshold that relates to projects that are not consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan statements that are listed in the petition are not regulatory in nature. They are guidance. Alatus believes that the project is quite consistent with the comprehensive plan and those policy guidance statements, but we note staff concurs in that, but we also note that those statements are interpreted and applied in a subjective manner, and that's exactly why they cannot be the kind of statements or considered rules that can determine whether a project exceeds a mandatory threshold. In contrast, our response gave an example where there can be circumstances where a comprehensive plan includes rules that you can clearly be inconsistent with because they're objective, such as for some cities that have large rural areas, for their land that's designated for rural guidance, they limit density to 1 unit per 5 acres. That's a clear-cut threshold that can be used, not whether something is, as in our plan statements, tend to be appropriate or compatible. The other potential effects, or the potential effects that are cited in the petition are generalized concerns and not the type upon which an EAW should be ordered. And the standard that you are applying is not simply to consider whether it's possible to speculate that a project may have an environmental effect. The petition must also present material evidence that such effects occur and be significant and could be significant. And in evaluating the potential for a significant effect, the city must consider the type of the effect described, the extent to which they are subject to mitigation by the city's processes, and you should also and can also consider relevant information that's been developed in other environmental reviews. The petition lists as types of potential effects construction impacts, and it describes a damage that occurred related to construction on a River Place project over 30 years ago. It only speculates that damage could occur based on this project. In contrast, we have provided a letter from a structural engineer that describes with specificity the many contemporary construction methods and measures that can be utilized to monitor and prevent damage to neighboring properties. Blasting, as occurred with the River Place project, is not going to be involved in this one. Alatus is already in consultation with the Pillsbury Library to keep them apprised of the project, the design, and to have those discussions about monitoring construction impacts. Other construction impacts, noise and dust, are regulated by ordinance and the city's regulatory review processes and permitting. Visual impacts, shadowing, the effect of the project on the character of the historic district and neighborhood, and consistency with the HPC guidelines and the city's comprehensive plan statements are the type of impacts and issues that are addressed properly through the city's HPC hearings and the Planning Commission hearings. The petitioners will have the opportunity to participate in those hearings and to provide their perspectives and any information that they believe should be considered in making those decisions. An EAW is not the place or forum for debating or deciding on a project. Whether a project is or isn't consistent with the comprehensive plan is not what an EAW is for. It is simply an informational gathering exercise, and the city's regular processes have and will continue to gather all the necessary information. For example, for major projects in the city, like this one, a TDMP, a travel demand management plan, a traffic and parking study is required as a matter of course, at the same level of detail and study that would occur if you did an EAW to look at traffic impacts. And the city has the regulatory authority to require mitigation, might be signalization or other issues based on the information that it will see in a TDMP. And I'll note, while it has not been submitted, a draft TDMP and traffic study has been prepared, and it indicates that no mitigation should be required. But again, that is a city normal city process. With respect to impacts of increased traffic on air quality, there have been recent EAWs in the area, and that is one of the subjects that you address in an EAW, air quality. And they have found that no actual additional study, no air monitoring or sampling should be required, because the projects studied would generate a relatively small increase in carbon monoxide levels and other vehicle-related air emissions. And examples of those recent studies are for the Superior Plating site, just a few blocks away, where there will be up to 1,000 parking spaces involved, and the Krause-Anderson project in downtown, also high traffic areas, where there will be 520 spaces. So even when an EAW was conducted, in terms of air quality impacts related to traffic, they found nothing worth doing any additional study on because of the amount of traffic in the area. So in conclusion, the petition describes potential effects that are typically anticipated in a development in an urban environment. The city has a comprehensive and sophisticated regulatory process in place to manage those impacts, and the petition does not present material evidence of potential for significant environmental effects that merits any further study. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lansing. Let's hear for two people. So I'll go the first people that signed in. Dean Reiser. Okay, great. All right. Then Joanne Netlin.
I thought I was just saying.
Okay, great. Thank you. Barbara
I think I'm it.
Glazer. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
My name is Barbara Glazer. I was born and raised in Minneapolis, went to grad school at the University of Minnesota, and then headed out to upstate New York to the Adirondack Mountains and Saratoga Springs, where for 35 years I've been working in the field of historic preservation, running a company that does the adaptive reuse of historic buildings. The Great Camp, Sagamore, and Uncas up in the Adirondacks, and multiple buildings in the historic community of Saratoga Springs. Came back here and was very excited to see the city's 2025 vision for where Minneapolis is going. When I was a kid, the Fauché Tower was the biggest building in the city. And I'm very excited with what's happening and the return of vitality to Minneapolis. In choosing to relocate here, as many Minnesotans do when their folks get elderly and their children come here for med school and have kids, I have now in the process and the last couple of years of relocating to Minneapolis. And in that process, had a chance to read the 2012 guidelines for the St. Anthony Falls District, the story of which is on your walls here, because I wanted to bring both my expertise and my resources and my family to be part of the revitalization of the city through the contribution to the historic districts. My daughter, who's now a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital at the university, lives 2 blocks away in the neighborhood, and my nephew and his wife now have opened Wilson and Willie's, the store over, as they are part of the reinvestment and the development of the North Loop. So it's an exciting time for all of us and our families. I'm here today representing a very diverse collection of people, most of us who have never met each other before until we've come together around a table being concerned about the scale of the Alatus project that's coming in here. And so we represent a variety of buildings, represent a variety of residences, of businesses, and of professional backgrounds and interests as we're coming to express these concerns. So here today, we just want you to know this request for an EAW is a serious request. It's not a superfluous or in any way frivolous delay tactic. This is, as you can see with the picture, going to be the second largest residential building in Minneapolis that is being proposed in the historic district on the other side of the river. And as was mentioned, the plan has always called for the biggest buildings to be in Minneapolis. Now we're seeing the kind of creep of that tall building with a density that's beyond what's appropriate for a historic neighborhood into this side of the river. We believe that the nature and location and scale of this proposal it demands and requires an EAW, but more importantly, the context in which it's happening. You got to realize, as you probably do at this point, we've got the Superior plating, big development going on. We've got Mortensen coming in. We've got the Schaefer-Richardson. And now I'm expecting that we're going to have a lot of new proposals coming in on the General Mills site, all within a half a mile of this site. So I think really importantly, we need to consider the cumulative impact and are just asking that an independent review process be conducted, particularly in light of the cumulative impact of so much development happening so quickly in our side of the neighborhood.
Ms. Glazer, can you wrap up, please?
Yeah, the second very shared concern has been the height of the building as that second largest building. We think it's bad precedent to be moving the scale of a building into our community. And in some ways, I really think it's unfair to NISE and the Schaefer-Richardson project, which had proposed 27 stories, then worked with the neighborhood to scale it down to an approved project that is both terrific infill, terrific addition to our community, and that I think then provides a model for what we should and be having in that region. So we're not against density. We think we can accomplish it within the historic guidelines in our community. We're not against change. We're here to be part of it. But we would like to ask and believe that the city would be remiss not to ask for an independent environmental assessment on this site.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With that, anyone want to make any remarks? Colleagues, any members? Okay. Is there a motion? Someone want to make a motion? Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Madam President. I believe we have before us a process that's rather circumscribed, and I think the facts before us lend to the staff's determination, and so therefore I will move that denial and direct staff to construct some findings for the record to that effect.
Okay. Councilmember Reich has moved to deny the petition and then direct staff to adopt or to prepare findings of fact and adopt them. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. And with that, we have dispensed with our agenda. Am I correct, Mr. Wittenberg? Okay. And motion to adjourn is in order. Move. All in approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you.